The leaves were falling on a regular basis this last fall, so I was using my blower about every 3 to 4 days to stay ahead of the leaves. I was using my blower the other day, and after refilling the fuel tank, I tried to restart it. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to plan, and after the first pull, the rope did not retract back into the blower. Needless to say, I wasn't very happy about the idea that I had just broken something that I might not be able to get parts for anymore. What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by. Today's project is this Kawasaki blower, and the problem is that the pull rope won't retract back into the blower, which unfortunately, because of its age, could mean the end of this blower. Now, I'm going to try and repair this blower. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. Now, we're only going to mention what these other options could be. We don't have enough time to look into them, but if you need more information on these options, you're welcome to ask as many questions as you need to. Like I said earlier, I gave it a single pull to try to restart it, and the next thing I knew, all the rope was hanging out of the recoil assembly. Now, that didn't derail my leaf blowing plans for the evening because I just grabbed one of the several blowers I had lying around from past repairs and finished up, but it did put a damper on my mood. The only thing we need to do is remove the recoil assembly from the blower and see what went wrong. After that, I can decide if I need to find a parts blower or if I can still get new parts for this one. The first hurdle is that I can't simply remove the bolts for the recoil and take it off. There's one bolt that holds part of the fuel tank to it, and to get to it, I need to remove the rear engine cover. Now, once all the screws have been removed for the rear cover, we can take it off the engine and finally get to the Allen head bolt I was talking about. I have thought about making a hole in the cover so I don't have to remove it, but to be honest, I don't mind making some clearance cuts, but this one would be a rather large cut. After taking off the recoil, I want to make sure the problem isn't with the engine, but as you can see, it's not stuck and it's turning just like it's supposed to and still has decent compression. That means the problem has to be in the recoil assembly. Now, the most likely problem is a broken spring, which wouldn't be too big of an issue. I'll just manually wind all the string back onto the pulley to give it another test pull, but that's when I noticed that this is one of those easy pull recoils with a second spring in it. So the end of the spring is supposed to be here in this opening, but as you can see, it's not there. That means it's under the cam somewhere stuck against it, and that's what's keeping the recoil from spinning and retracting the rope. The problem is, for some reason, I don't see how this is even possible. Once the recoil is off the engine, it should have been able to wind itself back up. Now, as I'm editing this video, I'm still confused as to why this was enough to keep the recoil from winding the rope back up. If you got a better idea on what happened, I'd really like to hear about it. But for right now, I'm going to remove the screw that holds everything together and see what happened underneath the cam. So here's the end of the spring, but the opening on the cam is on the opposite side of where it's supposed to be. I don't see that it's broken, and if I look at the bottom part of the cam, I don't see any serious damage here either, so maybe the damage could be where the spring sits inside the reel, but after taking it out, I don't see anything wrong here either, so now I'm not sure why the recoil didn't wind back up. Here's the spring, and I don't see any obvious problems with it, so I could try to put everything back together, but I have been considering putting it back without the spring, which would then bypass the easy pull system. This would then make it a regular recoil, which is less complicated and far less likely to fail like this one. The only issue is that I would have to lock the cam to the reel, probably using screws, but before I do that, I'm going to give it another chance. However, if this happens again, I'm going to bypass it. As you can see, without the spring, the recoil is working just like it should, except the cam isn't fastened to it, so at least we know the recoil spring isn't broken and the problem is with the easy pull components instead. Now, as I was looking at the spring, I did realize there was something wrong with it. This part of the spring isn't supposed to look like this. It looks like at some point the spring was able to wind past the rest of the coils, and this was the end result. If I put the spring back on the post on the cam, you can see that half of the bottom coil can get under it, and what that's doing is that the top end of the spring isn't able to seat into its anchor point. That means we need to get the spring past the edge of the post and line back up with the other coils. The other end of the spring should then be able to reach the opening in the cam. Instead of using the plastic post, I used a socket instead. That way I can pry against it and not worry about breaking it. Now, I'm not trying to get it perfect, just to a point where it can get past the post and still have a little clearance around it. To be honest, I think just putting it around the socket worked better than me prying on it. Either way, it should be enough for it to now slide past the edge of the post, which, as you can see, it's done just that. That means we can start putting the assembly back together. Of course, it seems to be a running joke on my channel, but I'm going to spray some lithium grease where the spring sits. I don't know if it's going to do any good, but I don't think it's going to hurt anything either. Now, something I didn't do last time was to put any Loctite on the screw that holds the assembly together, which, looking back at the video, I think the screw had backed out again, which probably caused this whole issue in the first place. So you could say that it was my fault for not using Loctite the last time, which I can agree with. The issue was that the last time something like this happened, I never touched it. That means the first time this happened, it happened on its own, straight from the factory. Of course, before I put the recoil back on the blower, I'm going to give it a quick cleaning. As I do use this as my personal blower throughout the year, it gets very dirty and I've had very little downtime with it, which is when I would normally clean something like this. So why bother even cleaning it? Well, believe it or not, it's not by my choice. I don't know how many videos I've made where I'll get a random comment about how I should have cleaned this and that, so to keep those comments down, I'll give whatever I'm working on a quick cleaning. I don't blame the viewers for focusing on the dirty parts of the machine, but hopefully they'll get something from the rest of the video as well. Now that most of the dirt has been scrubbed and washed away, I'll start putting everything back together, starting with the recoil, as it's easier to do with the rear cover off. I just realized, but this type of starting pulley, where the pawls are located, spins onto the crankshaft instead of being held on with a nut. Now, the reason this is so important is that if I had a nut, I could use a drill to start this blower if I ever have a complete recoil failure, but with no nut, I can't do that. The other option would be to remove the starter pawl assembly and replace it with a nut. Now, if I had to replace the recoil assembly, the price would be around $60, so even though I can still get parts for this blower, it's getting to the point where the replacement parts are more expensive than a modern counterpart for a different blower. I don't know what's going on here with this string. I could only guess that the previous owner had put a new handle on here, so this is how they tied the knot for it. I'm not going to redo it. Instead, I'm just going to clean it up by cutting off the extra and melting what's left over. The last thing we need to do is put some fuel into the tank, prime the fuel system, and then try starting it. Now, this did have a full tank when it had its little issue, but I poured all of it into the other blower to finish the job. I don't remember if I replaced the primer bulb on this car, but by its dark color, I expect it to break any time. Unfortunately, most of the leaves have already been blown to where they need to be the other day, so the only leaves I had left over were the ones off the path, which of course is where the underbrush is at. Now, the other option for a recoil that doesn't retract the pull rope is of course a broken spring. The fix is to replace the spring, but I would be very cautious doing that repair and to also wear some sort of eye protection as well. By the time I got done editing this video, and after taking a look at the raw footage again, I still cannot completely explain why the recoil locked up the way that it did, so I'm going to do something I've never done before, and I'm going to show you the raw footage of the issue, and maybe you can come up with an idea as to what happened. I hope that was enough of the raw footage to give you an idea of what you think went wrong, but as for me, this was my best guess as to what happened. At this point, I'm open to all of your ideas. So my question is, should I bypass the easy pull portion of the recoil system and make it a normal recoil? That way I don't have to worry about this type of problem again. Or should I do the easy thing, which is to just leave it alone? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope to see you in the next video.